to men who'd been taken prisoner by the Russians, one for a month and one for 3 months. And they had been castrated by drunken Russians wielding knives. Good afternoon, Jan.
Thanks for joining us, Christina. Now, you have, if it's insofar as it is possible, you become used to hearing horrifying accounts from this war and other wars too, but you were still shocked by what you heard from captured Ukrainian soldiers. Please tell us about that.
Yes, I mean, I've reported an awful lot about sexual violence against women in conflict and the use of war rape all around the world. But even more taboo to speak about is the use of sexual violence against men. And this story that I heard in Ukraine was absolutely shocking. I forgive listeners for explaining this, but basically I met a psychologist who treats the most difficult cases of soldiers coming back from war, and she had treated two men who'd been taken prisoner by the Russians, one for a month and one for 3 months, and they had been castrated by drunken Russians wielding knives.
I read your report in the paper, Christina. Every bit as horrifying as we're saying here. It's a curious fact, that, isn't it? Because we have often heard and read stories of the rape and torture of women in Ukraine and elsewhere around the world in theatres of war. And a story like this somehow seems more shocking, or maybe it's just the fact that you so often hear this aspect of the horror of war when it comes, I suppose, quite often to the forces we're talking about here, the Russian army.
I don't think it should be more shocking, because I think it's completely unacceptable what's happening to women around the world.
Clearly.
Actually, yeah, I mean, Dr. McCreggy, who is a great advocate for women's sexual violence, in whose hospital in Congo has treated 55,000 women and girls as young as 6 months old. He actually often says to me, if this was happening to men on this scale, do you think the world would still be so silent on the issue? So, but the fact is, it is much rarer to hear about it happening to men. And this story was completely horrific. The idea of these men being bound and gagged, and then these Russians approaching them with like boxcutter knives is really horrific. And they were not able to tell the psychologist who was treating them what had actually happened to them for over a month. And one of them had tried to kill himself. So she knew that something very bad had happened to them. She treated other prisoners of war who'd been tortured. But when they told her what had actually happened to them, she told me that it was the first time in her career, she's in her 40s, that she just couldn't, she didn't know what to do. So she thought she was going to cry. So she said to them, I need the toilet, and sort of ran away because she didn't want them to see that happening.
Yes, I suppose that in a way encapsulates it. I mean, we've now seen so many stories of women being, murdered, innocent men, women and children being murdered in Ukraine, women being brutally raped, children, very, very young children being raped. Nothing could be more horrifying than that. But I guess this kind of crime, we're not accustomed to it. So it strikes us, I don't know, it is more striking, not more horrifying, and certainly not more evil,
and
but more striking.
I also think, the scale of it. So this was 2 cases, but she said that other colleagues of hers who are treating returned prisoners of war, we don't know how many people have been taken prisoner, because nobody gives the figures at either side. But we do know that 2,600 Ukrainian prisoners have been released in swaps. So there obviously far more have been taken. And after our story came out on Sunday, one of the biggest Ukrainian newspapers then tweeted that they'd heard of hundreds of cases of this happening. So, it seems, and these soldiers said the way it was done, it didn't seem like they'd never done it before. It seemed like they knew exactly what they were doing.
Yes.